Hello and welcome to the Amped EV podcast. My name is David. I am the editor for The Buzz, and today our guest is Dave Thomas. He is the Director of Content Marketing and Industry Analyst at CDK Global. Let's get to the interview. Okay, Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. I want to hop right into this white paper produced by CDK Global. It's called EV Confusion Carries On, which I think would be a great alternative name to this podcast. But in this white paper, you share, all these kind of significant kind of knowledge gaps that you've found from consumers, particularly regarding maintenance, cost, charging infrastructure, and things. So I want to dive right into this point that really caught my eye. You found that the majority of those surveyed believe that annual maintenance costs for EVs are higher than for internal combustion engine vehicles. So where do you think this is coming from? Why do you think that consumers are thinking this way?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's an interesting thing to target in on because when we talk about EVs in general as an industry, we know a lot of things are true, and we talk about them on shows like this, on LinkedIn, all those things. But we have to understand the American consumer is not following any of that, right? So what they mostly see about EVs is what's in the mass media or from friends in their networks. And the one thing they all know is EVs are more expensive overall, right? They cost more to buy. Tesla started all off as a luxury brand when it started. So, that's kind of core to their belief. That's why we're assuming that they all chose that selection because, as we know, it's a core benefit of an EV is that maintenance costs are lower. There's no oil changes. The brakes should last much longer. All those kinds of things should pay off for the consumer in the end. And when we talk about confusion, we surveyed not just EV shoppers, but gas shoppers and hybrid shoppers, just to see where their different mindsets were. And EV shoppers ranked maintenance as being more expensive at a higher rate as gasoline shoppers. So it's all over the place that, everyone looking at shopping for any type of car really believes it's more expensive to maintain an EV.
That's really interesting. Would you happen to have any data available that actually breaks down the cost that tells us, kind of factually which tends to be higher?
So we don't have the maintenance cost per se, but we do have a companion paper to this called EV Service Today and Tomorrow, where we went to the dealers and the service departments because there is such a focus at the dealership level. That's what we try and do: connect dealers to consumers. Mm-hmm. At the dealership level. There's a thought out there that dealers feel like they're going to be making less money on service for EVs, and our study proved that is not the case. And so when we asked, the dealers what their costs are and what they're seeing in terms of revenue, it's they think they're going to see more revenue moving forward with EVs than currently, and that's typically because they are more advanced. It is more expensive to repair. Not necessarily service, but to repair them when something goes wrong. So there's a bit of that, but again, that's more on the repair side versus maintenance. Mm-hmm. So overall maintenance costs, they really should be lower. Yes.
Very, very interesting. Another point that I wanted to talk about from your white paper is talking about EV tax credits. There seems to be a lot of confusion there from consumers about if they're available, how to use them, how to go about using them, if they're worth it. Can you speak to that about a little bit? I mean, where does that confusion lie? What seems to be the main kind of point of contention there?
Yeah, this is an area where the EV shopper themselves, in general, they're pretty sure they know about the incentives and how they work. But of those who are unsure, which is about 25% of them, almost all of them are looking to the dealer to explain it. So they come in and they say, and they're just asking point blank, how do I get this credit? And to be honest, it's the government and the folks that have rolled out these incentives. They haven't made it easy on any of us. They've changed a number of times since they came out. They just changed again on January 1st in terms of how you can get the credit. Right now, the easiest way for anyone to get the credit is just to lease the EV versus anything else. So I think it's a multitude of factors. The rules against where the batteries are sourced, which just went into effect. That's something. I mean, first of all, that's not easy to ascertain anywhere in the industry, let alone for the common shopper. So they just came out with that list very recently after the rule went into effect. So it's I don't want to put. I'm not an anti-government person, but if there's any blame to be put, it's pretty much how they rolled out the rules and how they keep changing them.
Sure, yeah, and I can understand that can be very confusing. You think one thing is kind of going on, and then it changes, and it's not necessarily apparent that it has changed. So I mean, that's a very good point. You kind of touched on this earlier, and I want to dig just a little bit deeper into it about kind of where a mass audience tends to get their information. A lot of times it is from social media, and your white paper kind of delves into that a little bit. Can you kind of tell us, how did you discover social networks are influencing the potential EV buyer on what they might know and might not know about EVs?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's super important. And when we refer to social networks in the white paper, we're referring to someone's entire social network, family, friends, people they know, their neighbors, as well as who they interact with in social media. So I call them bubbles, basically. And you can think of it as in a very similar way to politics, how people are in their bubbles and they only believe certain things they see. We found it very similar in terms of EV shoppers versus other shoppers. So an EV shopper, more than 80% of them know someone else who owns an EV in their social network. They know them, they can ask them about them and learn from them. When you're a gas shopper and we ask them the same question, it was around 37%, I believe, just knew someone that had an EV. So they don't even have someone to go ask, what did you think? Was it easy to install something in your garage? They just don't have that same network available to them. And so the less they hear, the less interested they're going to be, in our opinion. So that social bubble that these folks live in is quite interesting. And then just on that social media front, EV shoppers definitely they get their EV news from YouTube. I mean, and it's not the mass media necessarily. They're, when they see something of interest, they go right to YouTube to find out more.
Interesting. And have you, in your studies, do you think that that's a good thing necessarily, or kind of pros and cons? Where do you land there?
I'm personally agnostic. We don't really have any, or the CDK is agnostic to that one. But it's interesting, right? Mm-hmm. There's certain things in social media where you hear different generations are using TikTok instead of Google for search on topics. That's always been interesting to me. That different social networks come about and people change their behaviors because of them. Yeah. But when you think of like and this show will be on YouTube, right? So, I mean, Absolutely. When you think of the traditional car review even, that's definitely shifted much more to YouTube for people trying to get more information. They want to see the vehicle. And what we found with EVs, because it is something new, they definitely want to see, touch, experience it in different ways. They don't want to just read about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. Talking about, getting a lot of that information from YouTube or from the internet or from wherever it might be, there's so much of it out there that a lot of times it can be hard for a consumer to really know if what they're reading is fact or fiction. So, with that being said, do you think is there kind of like a number one thing in your mind that is maybe misunderstood about EVs?
Oh, there's a tremendous amount that's misunderstood about EVs. I think within our industry, though, it comes down to who we're trying to get the message to. I think has been a miss since the rollout originally of EVs until now. It's not everyone, right? It's this target audience isn't the entire audience. And I think that's been a big miss for a long time. This is a little bit more just my own opinion here, but EVs are terrific for a lot of people, and we're marketing them to everyone, and including those that might not be great for. Sure. So whenever that negative group says, well, wait, this is negative for me, it throws the whole conversation out of whack. It gets people to, talk about apartment dwellers and people that have hard time, charging at home, which is the best use of EVs. It's like, well, that is still true right now, until the whole ecosystem kind of moves along. So 50%. I always use this 50% number. 50% of homes have a garage in this country, and more than 50% have more than 2 cars. That is the optimum way of having that second car to be an EV, and no one focuses on that. They always just go to the negative. So, if you talk about 50% of sales, that would be over 7 million new cars in the country. EV sales are at about 1, a little over 1 if you include plug-ins. So, I always just say there's this huge market that we could be focused on talking about the positives, but it's trying to get that good for everyone that's kind of slowing things down. And I think those are the stories that, unfortunately, those negative ones, whether it's range anxiety, charging at home, what have you, or charging as an apartment dweller, those are the ones that get out there. Those are the ones that break through a Wall Street Journal or a top tier publication, instead of the many, many multitudes of people that love just getting in their car in the garage, pre-warmed up with no fumes in your garage, and you never have to go to a gas station again. Those are the things that EV owners time and again will point to as just being the best part of owning it. And that's why they don't want to go back. And we have a future study coming out of EV owners, and they are not going back.
I look forward to reading that one as well. So kind of based on your studies and based on the data that you've seen, what is your biggest piece of advice for a dealer, to be able to give information to their customer?
Yeah, dealers are in a actual, again, this is a common misperception among EV enthusiasts I keep finding, and it's hard to get the point across to them where they think the dealer is very negative to EVs. That's not necessarily the case. There are some dealers in certain parts of the country that are having some troubles, clearly because the market's just not there. Mm-hmm. But the dealership is really the place where I mentioned this before, they can go in, see the EVs, they can touch the EVs, they can test drive the EVs. They also, almost every dealership in the country right now has a charging station in place, if not multiple ones. And they have the service. Again, I mentioned the EV service paper we have. Their service bays are ready. So when people have that concern, if something goes wrong, these dealers are ready for it. They can show them and take that off their mind, that question off their mind as well. And right now, in terms of, we talk about service and maintenance, it's like dealers are pretty much the only place where you're going to get them service no matter what. So having that dealer touch point is just crucial for EVs. And so, whether it's the dealer themselves or the consumer on the other side, it is a great touch point.
I hear you, for sure. So, given everything that you've learned so far, looking at what you know from 2023, looking beyond here as we're in 24 now, where do you see EV sales going? I know, just a number of years ago, we really thought they were going to spike way up. I don't think they're quite at at that spike that we expected, but they are certainly going up. So where do you see things going?
Yeah, I think in terms of 2024, it'll be a very interesting year. Personally, when I look at it, I don't see huge growth. Maybe it goes up another 10%. We go from 1.2 to 1.4, 1.6. There's just not, and it all comes down, and we don't, rate or review cars or take them on at a specific model and make level. But there are very few makes and models available even now. And that's something where you'll see a lot of headlines where it's like, oh, there's 40 new models coming this year. Those don't always actually arrive. So there's actually far fewer products for people to choose from. And I do believe that the type of vehicle, the product mix that's available isn't what everyone's looking for. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to point out one that is clearly where I see 2024 going, and that new Kia EV9. Mm-hmm. It's the type of vehicle, A, that's very popular, 3-row crossover, and B, it's one of those ones where a higher price tag for an EV is kind of offset by those vehicles are more expensive anyway. Mm-hmm. It looks really cool. And there's just not another one on the market in terms of a fully 3-row EV. I mean, the Tesla just has a very small back seat, but or third row. But and Rivian has a very expensive one. But for the most part, it's it. And from early indications, it's doing really well. So I think the automakers need to rethink a little bit about what that product offering is, because even those original, I shouldn't say original, but this last batch that hit the market a few years ago, Mach-E, the Ioniq 5, they called them SUVs, but they're really hatchbacks. and automakers phased out hatchbacks a decade ago for a reason, and they wanted a more traditional SUV. So you can kind of understand why this one is kind of picking up steam, and I think will be very successful. I think like the ID Buzz, there are certain ones that the Mercedes G-Wagon that's going to be electric. There are certain ones that really stand out as there will be a line for those, and people will be waiting for them. Well, a lot of these other ones might actually have those long days of inventory, like we've kind of been seeing headlines the past quarter or so.
Excellent. And do you see inventory? We've seen a lot of dealers having issues, maybe stocking some of these vehicles that consumers may be asking for. Do you see those inventory challenges easing up this year?
Well, I think for the massive EVs, in general, inventory will be better. But I think the few I just mentioned, it's going to be very tough to find them.
Sure, yeah.
And I think too, like even the Rivians are still very tight supply. Not really a dealer issue, but there are certain models that are really sought after and will be tough to find. But for the most part, I think an EV buyer, and there's terrific options out there. I mean, just like most new cars across the board are very good these days, every EV I've been in is an excellent vehicle, whether it's an EV or not. So there's lots of, if people want to make that switch, there's plenty for them to choose from, especially not everyone wants a 3-row SUV, right? So they'll be able to find them. There's plenty of inventory. It's still going to be expensive. Dealers and automakers are trying to discount them now that the incentives don't apply to most. So you'll see discounts, but that starting price is still really high. So it will be a little difficult. I will say it's going to be a difficult year to sell all those that aren't the hottest new one on the market.
Sure. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us here. There is a lot to unpack here. I would encourage anybody to go and actually check out this white paper, EV Confusion Carries On. A lot of really interesting stuff in there that we actually didn't get to here. Just fascinating stuff. So I look forward to your next one, and thanks again for taking the time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, a lot of really insightful stuff there from Dave Thomas at CDK Global. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time.